Okay, so when we take a look at watches and microbrands, there's typically a lot of microbrands out there. But honestly, a lot of times when we look at these big name YouTubers, these content creators online, when they talk about microbrands, there's only a small handful that they really cover. And, there are some that they cover that are good, and there's some that they cover that are bad. And they kind of say like, the bad ones, they're kind of scammers, they steal your money. And the good ones, like, look what they're doing. They're making these really great watches for very affordable prices and whatnot. And that's great and all, but they typically only cover a small handful. There's actually quite a few more microbrands out there, and one that particularly doesn't get covered by a lot of these big name YouTubers is this right here. This is the Momentum watch. This is a Canadian watch brand, and I'm Canadian, so this is great because it's kind of like supporting our local business here. But yeah, it's a Canadian watch brand that's been around since, I believe, 1980s. They used to be called St. Moritz. And if I remember correctly, this is something that I read up a long time ago. If I remember correctly, I think they used to make watch assemblies and components for other watch brands. And then at some point, they started making their own watches under the Momentum brand right here. I could be wrong, but more or less, regardless, they've been around since the 1980s, which is like 40 years ago. So they have a lot of a lot of time spent making watches, and they definitely have a lot of experience in this category. This one that I want to talk about today is this one right here. This is the Momentum Atlas. Now, this particular watch is no longer available on their website. The series, the Atlas series that they have, is still available, but this particular one is no longer available on their website. The one, when you go onto the website, the one that you'll see is called the Atlas Eclipse. And the difference is that one is solar powered, whereas this one is not. And I can already tell, like, a lot of you guys at this point in time, when you hear that, you'll probably be either clicking away from this video, or maybe you're really interested, but most people will probably be clicking away because yes, this is indeed a quartz watch. You can probably already tell by the ticking seconds hand that this is a quartz watch. And say what you will about quartz, but I personally think that there's always still a time and a place for a quartz watch. For a watch like this, I typically use it as a beater watch, and it works fantastic for that as a quartz watch. The thing about quartz is that it is reliable, it is accurate, and is always ticking. Especially a watch like this, for example, as a beater watch, you'll most likely have this on your wrist for weeks on end, maybe months even. And for a mechanical automatic watch, you can't really say that it's going to run very accurately after such a long period of time. A lot of times when you look at your watch, after a few weeks, it might be, plus a couple minutes off. I've seen some that are 5 minutes, even 10 minutes. Maybe those watches need to be serviced, but regardless, it can swing pretty wildly after a period of time. And a lot of times when you look at them, and you haven't reset the watch in a little while, you're always questioning whether or not the time is accurate. And you always have to like check in on your phone or other timekeeping devices once in a while just to make sure that it's running accurately. And with a quartz watch, it is always going to be accurate. So it's actually great to have in a collection, especially like this can be the watch that you use to make sure your other watches are keeping time perfectly as well. So it's a great a watch to have on hand. Another thing that makes this great for a beater watch is you're not always going to be wearing a beater watch. Sometimes you want to switch it out for maybe something fancier when you have a date night, or if you're going on vacation, you might swap it with a GMT, and you might come back in a week. And the thing about this is that this is still going to be ticking after a week of just sitting here on the desk. You can't say the same thing about an automatic watch. It's most likely going to be dead by then. With this, you can literally just pick it up, put it back in your wrist, and away you go. It is that simple. Anyways, going back to my point earlier, when you check on their website, this particular watch is no longer going to be in stock, but they do have a page for this watch on their website. And I believe there's somewhere on an FAQ tab that says, like, if there's enough interest with this non-solar Atlas watch, they may bring it back at some point in time. So we'll see if there's enough interest with this one. But regardless, if you look at the solar, the ones, the Atlas Eclipse solar watches, they look pretty much the same as this. So it has a very similar look. Maybe there's some small differences, but overall it looks very similar. It wears very similarly as well. So that's that. So this one that I have here is the 38 millimeter, and it has a white dial. And the thing about Momentum watches is that they're built, even though they're quartz, they're built very well. So I believe a lot of their watches are made with titanium, and this one is also no exception. So the entire watch case is titanium. The bracelet is also full titanium as well, even the clasp back here. It's one of those watches where you pick up and you're like, wow, I can't believe it's this light. This feels incredibly light. And oftentimes when I go back to my stainless steel watches, it's like, wow, it's a night and day difference. And honestly, I miss wearing this watch when I go back to those ones. So yeah, it's one of those watches that feels incredible. I forgot to weigh it. I'm gonna I'll weigh it later, and I'll put the weight on screen right now. When we talk about the bracelet, this is the stock bracelet. It comes with solid end links, so that's something that is rare to see with a lot of these lower budget watches. So this one has solid end links. The bracelet itself also has solid links. They're not screw-on links. They're one of those like push pin links, but it's solid links, which is good. The clasp is also titanium. It's a stamped clasp. It has a double push deployment, and also it has a safety on the end as well. It has, I think like 4 or 5 links that you can remove on each side, give or take. And also there are 3 micro adjustments on the clasp itself. So yeah, I mean, it's a very nicely built watch. You can tell by the wear on it and the scratches and blemishes that this is titanium. I mean, say what you will. I mean, I think some people either love this or hate the look of this. I personally, I mean, it does bother me sometimes to see that there's so many blemishes on here, but that's just the way titanium is, right? You can argue that this is patina, right? But it has that, like, in a sense, I really like the fact that it has that raw, sort of uncoated titanium gunmetal gray kind of a look to it. Aside from the titanium build, a lot of their watches on their website, you can also find that they have sapphire crystals on it. So this one as well also has a sapphire crystal. This one is a single domed sapphire. And personally for me, I love dome crystal, and especially I love single dome crystal. And mainly is because of the distortion that you see when you look at it from the edge. I personally think that is absolutely beautiful. I know some people don't like it, but I think that's gorgeous. And with domed crystals, I also think that dome crystal works very well for a lot of watches, just because it kind of gives you that more premium sort of a feel with a dome crystal. Of course, there's still a time and place for flat crystals. Like for example, this one right here. This is the Boulder Venture Black Dawn that I featured recently on another video. You can tell, you can see here that I've swapped the strap out for this titanium bracelet that I found on Amazon. Nothing wrong with the Marie Nationale strap. It's just I like to switch it out once in a while. So I currently have it on a bracelet instead of the Marie Nationale strap. But regardless, this watch is first of all, this watch is also a Microbrand, and it is a much younger Microbrand than this one, but it's also more popular. And they're both kind of in that sort of field watch adventure kind of a line of watches, and so they're kind of competitors in a way. But it is what it is. But this watch, it is a beautiful watch, and the thing with this one is that you can tell by the shape of it, it's very angular. There's a lot of sharp edges, not sharp in a way that'll cut you, but sharp in a sense that it has very defining lines, straight lines, and sharp corners and whatnot. So I think for this watch, it works very well with a flat crystal. And so that looks beautiful. But typically, I think a lot of watches generically has a lot of more rounded shapes, softer edges. And so a lot of times, I think a dome crystal works very well for most watches. And some watches I even replace with a dome crystal myself, a third-party one, just to give it that more sort of premium look. And aside from that, it also has a screw-down crown. This is an unsigned crown, screw-down, 100-meter water resistance. So it's very capable if you want to go swimming with it or sink it into the pool, for example. It has a date window on the 3 o'clock position. It has very nice big lettering, very legible, and it also has a really, really beautiful lume. The entire dial of the watch is lumed, and it just looks incredible. I'll give you guys a lume shot in a bit, but yeah, it's a very beautiful lume that kind of covers the entire face of the watch, and it's just very legible regardless of daytime or nighttime. Okay, before we go any further, let's talk about measurements. So if you guys don't know, I don't have calipers, so I'm using a measuring tape for these. until at least at some point when I start getting a pair of calipers to work with. But for now, this will work just fine. In terms of the case diameter, I'm going to go from the edge here to this edge. It is 38 millimeters. So that's accurate to what they're advertising on their website, 38 millimeter for this case diameter. If we go from the end here to the end of the crown, let's take a look at that. So I'm starting at the 10 centimeter position just to make it easier to measure. 41 millimeter in diameter from the end over here of the case to the end of the crown. So 41 from there to there. The case diameter of the circle is 38. If we go lug to lug, 45 millimeters. The thing with this is that it also has male end links. So it actually protrudes out more than 45 millimeters. So if we go lug to lug, considering accounting for the end links, then we're looking at about 50 millimeters lug to lug from end link to end link. Oh, thickness. Actually, you know what? It's hard for me to do thickness without a caliper. So I'm just going to give you guys the thickness from the website. I think it should be pretty accurate. But yeah, overall, yeah, this is a well-sized watch for, I think, most people. But let's get into the negative. So I am a little bit different in the sense that I am not most people. I have tiny wrist. My wrist size is about 6 inches, so it's super small, and I'm aware that it's well below the average, especially for male wrist size. So yeah, a lot of watches don't fit on my wrist very well. I'm gonna give you guys a wrist shot with this. This watch is, I would say it could be smaller. Personally, I think it works in a sense, but like it is still, when you look at it, it is still rather big. So that's one con that I would say with this. If you guys have small wrists, you might want to consider another size. So the thing about this is that, even though the case diameter is actually perfect for me, 38 millimeters is great for my wrist, but the lugs actually extend out pretty far. They're actually pretty long lugs. And as I mentioned earlier, the bracelet also has these male end links on them, so it really extends the watch and makes it wear a lot bigger than what it is. I mean, realistically, in the real world, it's not really a huge deal because typically people, when they look at your watch, they're not looking at it like this. They're looking at it like this or like this. You don't really notice that it's a lot bigger unless you're wearing a ginormous watch. But typically, when it's within the size that fits your wrist, it's typically okay just wearing it day to day. But obviously, if you look at it like this, from top down like this, it does look pretty large. The other thing that adds to the larger size of this watch is the fact that it has a single dome crystal. As I mentioned earlier, I like single dome crystals, so that's a plus for me. But the one disadvantage of a single dome crystal is that it actually magnifies the dial itself. So when you have a watch that, even though it's the right size for my wrist, with such long lugs, and it has this really large dial with these really big numbers for legibility, and you put a single dome crystal on it, it magnifies that even more. And now it looks like I have this ginormous watch on my wrist. So that would be one kind of drawback. It's a little bit of a nitpicky drawback, especially for me, because as I mentioned earlier, I do like single dome crystals. So I honestly, I don't mind it so much just because of the fact that it's single dome, but it does have the disadvantage where it magnifies it and it makes it look so much bigger on the wrist. The other thing is that, wearing this watch, with such a big crown that's sticking out on the 3 o'clock position, oftentimes I notice that it really stabs into my hand right here whenever I bend my wrist. So it does this very often, and it actually is a little bit uncomfortable. Personally, for me, I like watches with crown positions at the 4 o'clock position, or even on the other side of the watch, if that's possible. But I've also worn other watches with a 3 o'clock position crown, and it doesn't really do this that much, but this one for some reason really does jet out quite a bit from the watch, and it does get a little bit uncomfortable. Not a big deal. Again, I just gotten used to wearing this watch a little bit higher on the wrist, so it kind of clears that. So all in all, it is fine. But I think the biggest drawback with this watch, and honestly, I can't say it's a fault of this watch itself, a lot of Quartz watches has this problem, is the fact that the second hand doesn't line up with the ticks. And it does, especially if you're somebody who is a watch enthusiast, a watch lover, something like this probably really bugs you. If you're somebody that's OCD like myself, something like this also really bugs me as well. You know, I've just learned to be okay with it. I'm not staring at the watch constantly, watching the second hand move. So I just kind of ignore it. But realistically, yes, it does bug me that it doesn't line up very well. But honestly, a lot of quartz watches don't line up, the tick and the second hand. It doesn't line up perfectly. But then again, there are some watches that do line up very well, surprisingly. So it's kind of one of those things where like I wish it was better, but it's unfortunately not. And it's just sad to see that, you know, every single tick almost never lines up on this watch. Even the 12 o'clock position. So keep an eye on the 12 o'clock position. It is slightly behind the 12 o'clock position. Some of them are a little bit behind and some of them are a little bit too forward. So it's very inconsistent and every single tick is pretty much off. So if that's something that bugs you, do keep that in mind. And yeah, I mean, it is just the nature of a quartz watch. As promised earlier, this is the Lume Shot. As you can see, this watch looms and glows very beautifully. I mean, I think this looks absolutely stunning. It kind of gives you that sort of radioactive glow that you don't see a lot in a lot of watches. So it has a really beautiful lume, and I love looking at this, regardless if you're looking at it during the daytime or the nighttime. It's very legible and it's very easy to read. And if this watch is too big for you, take a look at their website because they actually offer this watch in multitude of different sizes. There's the 32 millimeter. There's this 38 millimeter, there is the 42 millimeter, and there's also a 44 millimeter case size as well. The larger sizes, you'll see that they have a day and date window. With these smaller ones, it's just a date window. So it's nice that even on the 32 millimeter, there's still a date window because a lot of times the smaller watches, they typically exclude that. So it's nice that they still have it on the smallest size. In terms of prices, you know, because there's so many different variation in sizes and straps options, the price ranges from around $200 something to around $300 something, and that's Canadian. So in American, you're looking at around average 200 something USD. So for a watch that is within $200 American, $300 something Canadian, I personally think that this watch is a great value for money. Obviously, it's not going to be one of those watches that you can get from the grocery store for $50 and you can wear it for a little while and then throw them away. It is not that. This watch is still a bit of an investment with your money, but what you're getting is you're getting a very high quality watch with great material, very accurate, and runs very well. And you know, Momentum is a brand that does a lot of these outdoorsy watches, adventure watches, and whatnot. So you know that this watch is going to be robust and it's going to be still ticking, you know, regardless of what scenario you're going to put it through. So it's definitely something that, you know, it's not very expensive. It's still within a budget price range for watches, but you're getting a really good, well-built watch for that money. So if you're looking for a new watch, definitely give Momentum a look.